Hi there, I'm Admiral Chris Barrie. I'm the Chair and Founder of PTSD Australia New Zealand, better known perhaps as Fearless Outreach. And before I begin my message at this holiday time this year, I'd like to acknowledge all of you in our audience, our Indigenous Australians, people who have come from immigrant families, and those of us that have been Australians founded over many generations. As we come together in the Australian multicultural society, I think it's very important that we look to each other and we recognise some of the really good things about being Australian. With this holiday season, and as we transition into next year, I thought it was worthwhile recapping on where we have been, what we've been thinking about, and what lies ahead. Many of you, I hope, were participants in our first national conversation in 2019, and perhaps in the second national conversation in 2021. In both of those endeavours, we owed a great debt to Alex Gehrig, who's now stepped down as our Chief Executive, for the organisation of both events. And I hope many of you will remember fondly that as we unpacked your stories of trauma and the impact it's had on your lives, and opened up to hearing other people about their stories, you can recognise the value that networking provides for each and every one of you. At the same time, of course, I also hope you've recognised that the people who live with you, your loved ones, your family, your workmates, and other people that may live nearby, can also be affected by the trauma you experienced, and I hope that's also had some impact on the way you manage your lives. Now, I'd like to unpack where we've been going over the last 18 months or so. The board has spent a great deal of time thinking strategically about the direction for Fearless and what kind of an organisation we'd like it to become. We've had a very successful start-up period, but now it's time for us to reconsider the future and where we want to go in the years ahead. We've thought deeply about strategic direction, and we've thought very deeply about our funding prospects, because without good funding, no amount of strategic direction is going to come to anything. And I have to be frank and say to you that the philanthropic support we enjoyed from our philanthropist on the Sunshine Coast is drying up, and without more funding opportunities opening up early in 2025, then I'm afraid the future doesn't look that good. But I am confident that as we look to new directions and new things that we should be doing, more funding opportunities will open up. So what has the board been thinking about? Well, we've been thinking about our strategic direction in terms of how we lobby, how we approach governments to make it clear that we don't think enough is being done to help people who are living with post-traumatic stress disorder in our community, and to recognise that PTSD comes from a lived experience, and sometimes it's very difficult to chronicle the kinds of trauma that people have been through, because, as we've always said, each person's post-traumatic stress disorder is a unique situation, and that's what makes it so difficult to say there's a recipe book in treatment. And it follows. That's why we have advocated quite strongly for bringing research and treatment together so that we can offer to all people who live with PTSD the gold standard, the world class, the best treatments that are available in the world. And I think I can say to you with some confidence that Australia is on a pathway to become a leading nation that will be able to provide combined research and treatment all over the country in the near future to people who live with PTSD. Apart from being a major lobby group, we also recognise the need to speak on behalf of all of those organisations working on post-traumatic stress disorder issues. Some of you know about them, and some of you may not know how many there are. When we began Fearless, we counted 3,500 groups working on different aspects of PTSD in our community. And I dare say since those days, that number has grown. But even so, there is still no large lobby group in Australia advocating specifically for post-traumatic stress disorder. That means we need to be doing better, and that means there might be some changes to the board to be more effective. Speaking of changes to the board, as I've said already, our Alex Garrick has now stepped down as our Chief Executive, and we've welcomed on board Paul Milne to take over from him. And I know Paul will have a message for you at this time of the year as well. We've also brought on board a couple of other new board members, and I'm in the process, I'm delighted to say, of bringing on board Dr. Steve Robson, that some of you may remember gave us a webinar on his own experience with post-traumatic stress disorder and thoughts of suicide, who's recently stepped down as the President of the Australian Medical Association. And Steve, highly networked across a whole range of medical activities and also very energetic, will make a valuable contribution, I'm sure, in the years ahead. As well, we're bringing Dr. Anastasia Ronis onto the board, I hope. And some of you may also remember her participation in the second national conversation and a webinar. And Anastasia is also the co-founder of the Australian Institute for Health and Wellness, which is a similar kind of organisation to the one that we have in PTSD ANZ. So there are just two ways in which we're going to, I think, provide more energy in our board and perhaps lower its average age. The second group of people that I'd like to acknowledge and thank are our ambassadors, the Fearless ambassadors. There are a few of them around our community, but I'd particularly like to talk to people like Kerry Atherton with her Stories of Hope. Kerry's been a very strong advocate for us up in Queensland. She does a lot of valuable work in her own community and should be well known to most of our viewing audience. So, now that we're in the holiday season, and now that I'm looking into 2025, I'm thinking to myself there are a range of challenges ahead. And some of those challenges are going to be fairly confronting, I suspect. Can I say this is a time for us to think carefully about ourselves and to make sure that we're managing our own lives in the very best way? By that I mean using that toolbox that we've often spoken about: diet, reduced alcohol consumption, exercise, group activities, particularly sharing your own thoughts and experiences with other people, and being careful about your impact on the people who live with you, and making sure that your loved ones and the people you value know about those things and that you are open with them as you deal with the impact that PTSD is having on your lives. We also know that the holiday season at the end of each year is a difficult time for some people. I hope every one of you can take comfort from those who are around you and from the way in which you are in charge of your lives. I hope that we can look forward into 2025, seeing our viewing audience grow and seeing how we can become more effective in advocating for treatment and research in PTSD that will be second to none. In the meantime, I give you my best wishes for good fortune. I hope whatever lies ahead for every one of you exceeds your expectations, and I look forward to seeing you perhaps on a video next year. Thank you.